Hi, this is Kelsey Fukowski, and in this video we're going to be looking at the major themes of period 4, which of course are very important to know for the AP US exam. So let's start first in the 1800s. Jefferson is going to become president after a very tumultuous election, and this is called the Revolution of 1800. And you might be wondering, well, where's the uprising, where's the violence? Well, in this case, keep in mind that revolution by its very definition means a change, and you're going to have a change from the Federalist Party to the Democratic Republicans. And so that is going to be a shift in the guard. You're not going to see the Federalists really coming to power at the presidency anymore. But nevertheless, it is certainly a marked change. And in other countries, when you've seen a shift in power, you tend to see violent uprisings. The United States does not see that. But one of the parts that are very important in the Jefferson presidency, and we'll go into other ones as well, such as the Louisiana Purchase, is you're going to see the eventual leading to the War of 1812. And it's going to begin with the impressment of American sailors. And of course, you have the Chesapeake affair that's going to precipitate that. And Jefferson's response in terms of trying to steer clear of really European affairs, sort of echoing to an extent George Washington's farewell address, is going to be, of course, the Embargo Act. And that's going to prohibit trade with any European nation. And eventually that's going to be limited just to France and England, who of course are having their ongoing disputes as they've always had throughout history. However, the problem is this is relatively a self-inflicted wound, particularly in the Northeast, and this is going to negatively affect the economy in a very detrimental way. And of course, this is probably perhaps the most unpopular part of Jefferson's presidency. Now, as a Democratic Republican, remember he's more about states government in terms of them having the power, less about the national government having power. He's a strict constitutionalist. Remember, he's also very much sees the idea of having an economy that's based on agriculture as sort of the best way to go. Of course, that does not really happen. But after the Jefferson presidency, you're going to, of course, have Madison take the reign, another Democratic Republican. And, of course, this is going to lead to the War of 1812. You'll note that this is going to be dubbed Mr. Madison's War by the Federalists. And the Federalists are even going to meet at the Hartford Convention in New England, in which they're even going to espouse the ideas of secession and seceding from the United States. Of course, that does not happen, and after the war, this is going to make the Federalists look like traitors, which will spell their demise. But of course, this is something that they're considering. On the other side, you have these war hawks, these congressmen, who want war with Great Britain. They want to go on to Canada, as their slogan was. And of course, upon finding after the Battle of Tippecanoe that the Native Americans, in particular the Tecumseh's Confederacy, was being aided by the British, this is going to be sort of the last straw, and you're going to see war declared. Now, of course, keep in mind that we are concerned with the events of the War of 1812, such as the White House being burned down, or a lot of the action happening along the Great Lakes, in particular Champlain. However, you have to keep in mind that AP is looking at the bigger ideas, such as the results of the War of 1812. Of course, this is going to reaffirm America's independence. This is going to make the United States a world power, although, of course, it will take a more isolationist approach under Monroe. As I said earlier, the Federalist Party is going to be spelled out doomed because of their secession meeting. Of course, that does not happen. But this is going to inspire nationalism. It's going to usher us into a period known as the era of good feelings. You're even going to see people moving out west following this, as you don't see the British forts and territories out there any longer. And of course, down in the South, you'll see Jackson made into a national hero following the Battle of New Orleans. Of course, that's going to shadow his rise eventually to the presidency. So with respect to the rise of nationalism, we're going to see the expansion of the United States following the Louisiana Purchase. This is enhanced even more after the War of 1812. But you even see the enhancement of national power following the use of judicial review in Marbury v. Madison. And then you're going to be, of course, seeing the use of the Supremacy Clause and the Elastic Clause, the McCulloch v. Maryland, along with Gibbons v. Ogden, of course, that being with respect to the Commerce Clause. All three of these cases are certainly going to be significant powers to the national government. You also see economic nationalism in the sense of Henry Clay's The American System, trying to, continue that isolationist theme by being self-sufficient, imposing the tariff, right, improving infrastructure, having a national bank. Those are things that are, from Henry Clay's perspective, going to be instrumental for the developing United States. Of course, the United States is not that old at this point. And then, of course, you have the Monroe Doctrine, which is going to also continue that theme of nationalism and isolationism, trying to, of course, keep the European nations at bay. Now, as this ushers in the era of good feelings following the War of 1812, certainly nationalism. This is the time before we see the rise of sectionalism amplified. This will be ended by the Panic of 1812. This is the first financial collapse since the founding of the nation, and you're going to see the rise of sectionalism, particularly with the corrupt bargain in 1824, in which the election will be swung to with respect to Henry Clay swinging the election to John Quincy Adams, as we will see that will be a major blow to Jackson and his fellow Jacksonians. And we're going to see the rise of political parties. Remember, this was an election that only had Democratic Republicans. You did not have a Federalist candidate, as they were basically ended after the War of 1812. Now, we're going to see, of course, the rise of Jackson in 1828 with the democratization of voting requirements. We're going to see the ending of property requirements, and you're going to see the expansion of suffrage for white males, and now it does not matter if you have property. So that's very big. Of course, Jackson's going to be seen as the common man. You're going to have the implementation of the spoils system, where he's going to be eliminating 10% of federal workers and putting them in place of people who were loyal to him. Certainly the patronage system being very much evident there. Perhaps the biggest cause for Jackson of contention is going to be the Tariff of Abominations. If you recall, his own vice president from South Carolina, Calhoun, is advocating this idea of nullification, that the states can nullify a federal law. Of course, we know with the Supremacy Clause that's not really allowed, but nevertheless, you're going to have Jackson in Congress using or threatening to use the force bill in which he would hang. He even threatened to hang his own vice president, Calhoun. Of course, ultimately, we're going to have a compromise thanks to Henry Clay once again, but this is going to further sectionalism between the North and the South. The South, of course, thinking that they're paying for the tariff, that they're paying for more expensive goods that they could have purchased overseas, and now they're being forced to purchase it from the North, which is seen as benefiting much more from this. And then on top of that, you have the National Bank, which Jackson thought was a tool of the rich, and of course he's going to defund that and divert funds to these banks known as pet banks in specific states. And because of this defunding, you're going to cause the Panic of 1837, which is going to have a high unemployment. You're going to have a lot of land defaults, and it's going to be very problematic economically for the nation. Of course, that will be experienced under his successor, Van Buren, and won't happen under Jackson, but this is going to be creating a tide of anti-Jackson sentiment. So as you see here, Van Buren is going to be the hand-picked successor of Jackson, and he is, of course, going to win that election. Now, we're going to see the Panic of 1837 sort of dooming Van Buren's re-election in 1840. In particular, you're going to have the rise of the Whigs. They are very much anti-Jackson. You're going to have the continuation of the Federalist Party. They basically are of policies. They're just renamed the Whigs, of course, espousing stronger, broader national government. You're even going to see Henry Clay running for election there. Of course, he does not win. But by 1840, you will see Harrison being the winner of the Whig Party. He, of course, does die very quickly within his presidency, and John Tyler will become the president and dubbed his excellency. The problem with Tyler, he's not really much of a Whig. He's more of a Democrat who just really was anti-Jackson. So nevertheless, you're not going to see Whig policies being implemented all that much, but you are going to have the rise of the two-party system, and that's going to be firmly entrenched. So keep that in mind. That's a big outcome of the 1840 election. Other things to mention, Transcendentalism. Of course, this is very uniquely American. Of course, seeing the good in individuals, believing society's institutions were corrupt at times. And you see really Thoreau taking this to an extent with civil disobedience during the Mexican-American War. But of course, this is going to be captured in art and literature. You're also going to see Emerson espousing these ideas. You're going to see this in art with the Hudson River School. And again, this is uniquely American. Certainly had some European influence, but this is not seen in other countries. You don't have the beauty, the mountains, the rivers, all this wonderful stuff that is very uniquely American if you've ever gone to any national parks. Other things to mention here too, the market revolution, the industrial revolution, the development, as we're going to see the rise of industry, factories, the Lowell system with the factory girls. Also at the same time, we're going to see an increase in infrastructure with railroads, canals, roads. And that's going to be accommodated, especially with canals that can go up current thanks to the steamboat. So a lot of new improvements. The question is, who should fund these improvements? If you're Jackson, he's going to say that's the states. If you're Henry Clay, he's going to, of course, say the national government. So there's going to be that state versus national government debate that's going to continue. This era is also marked by the age of reform with the Second Great Awakening. It's going to be focusing on the individual in their important need to get involved in whatever types of reforms that they see fit. In particular, you're going to see the rise of the women's rights movement as they are going to meet in Seneca Falls and draft the Declaration of Sentiments. So that's going to be a very early part here with women's rights being moved forward. Women are also going to be getting very much involved with the temperance movement. That is important, as we'll see that come to fruition, of course, with the 18th Amendment, but that won't be until, of course, the 1900s. Prisons, education reform as well, and then, of course, the big one, abolition. Women are also involved, such as the Grimke sisters. You're also going to see different perspectives between Douglas, Garrison, Turner. Should slaves have a violent uprising? Should they be immediately emancipated? Should they be part of the American Colonization Society where they go back to Africa? Of course, that does not work, but there are a variety of perspectives in the North as to how they should go about this. Also developing at this time is Manifest Destiny, as we're going to see the Texas Revolution, which is going to lead into the Republic of Texas. And that's, of course, going to precipitate the Mexican-American War, which is basically started by Polk as he's going to initiate a sort of confrontation with Mexico. And that's going to lead to an annexation of a lot of land in the Southwest thanks to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And that's going to significantly increase the size of the United States. Also, the 5440 or fight slogan is going to become popular in Oregon, as Oregon is also going to have its parallel increase as well into the United States. Of course, at this time, you're going to have ongoing treaties and ongoing battles with Native Americans that continues to be a theme as it relates back to the French and Indian War. So to sort of recap at this point, you're going to have the rise of sectionalism following the era of good feelings, I would say around 1819, 1820. Not only seeing this with the rise of political parties, two political parties, also economic differences between the North and the South. The North being much more focused on industry, the South much more on agriculture. But certainly the biggest rise of sectionalism that's going to continue into the Civil War is going to be slave versus free states. This all goes back to the Louisiana Purchase, and how are you going to distinguish and keep that delicate balance? You're going to have the Missouri Compromise beginning that slave versus free state, and that's just going to continue, especially as Texas is going to be annexed as well as other states in the West. And this is going to be a continuing theme not only in period 4 but also period 5.